Guys, it finally happened. It finally happened, and I actually can't believe this. So for those of you unaware, yesterday was Genshin's 4.7 livestream, and there was a lot of things dropped in the livestream. You know, of course, as natural, we've got new characters, we've got a new event, but we've got a special new event coming to Genshin, and this is the Imaginarium Theater, and it is our new endgame, which is finally coming to Genshin. So the event is at the back of Mondstadt's library, and the game mode is a combat game mode. How it works is that you will actually be required to select 7 units. 4 is for your immediate team, and 3 is, you can say, sort of on standby. Now, this isn't really different when it comes to the things we've already been doing. You know, we play the Spiral Abyss, you pick 8 units, and other combat game modes, you also pick 8, but the thing that is different is actually the freedom you have in selecting the units. So, how this works is that basically with every Imaginarium Theater, there's going to be a certain criteria for the units that you're able to select. So if I'm not mistaken, of the ones that is showed in the live stream, you are able to pick Pyro, Animal, and I believe Dendro. Now this of course can pose a few problems. Let's say you don't have these, Pyro units or whatever, they're not built and so on. So there is some ways to actually solve this. So first is that there are trial characters, which is again not anything new. There is also a special category of units where they don't meet the requirements, but you're able to still make use of them, so that is good. And then there is a third where basically of all the friends that you have in Genshin, they can actually lend their characters to you and you can make use of them. So while you are restricted, this shouldn't be too much of a problem. Now when you choose your 7 units, they'll actually gain a certain amount of buffs. It can be like attack, defense, whatever. But what's interesting is that these buffs aren't just limited to the theater. Actually, these 7 units will have these buffs outside of the theater. So in the overworld, in let's say different limited time events, and though I doubt this, it's possible even in the Abyss. As for how the theater is when you're actually playing it, it's a series of combat challenges, and your goal is basically to beat all of them. And while you're playing these combat challenges, you'll notice the mechanic of Vigor. Now Vigor is basically just energy. If you play a unit for a challenge, that'll cost them 1 Vigor, and let's say eventually they run out, that's when the other 3 units that you've selected come into play. Or basically if that one unit doesn't have enough Vigor, you replace them with one that does, and you continue on your run. Now I should mention that when you start your run, you don't have all 3 of the extra selected units that you've chosen. Actually, you'll probably have 2, but for the third, you'll only be able to make use of them after you clear a certain battle, or if you actually trigger a special event. And speaking of special events, you've probably seen this purple flower currency. I'll admit I was actually a bit worried when I saw this, just because I thought that this was basically resin. So, you need this special currency to play the game mode, just as you need resin for domains, but thankfully this isn't the case. Actually, this is just a special currency used to trigger special events, where you're able to gain access to that third extra unit you've selected in the beginning, or actually, as Dainsleif mentioned, trigger certain perils or dooms. And this probably means that behind these special events, there are probably some hidden traps that will actually make our fights harder, so this is like another extra thing we have to keep mind of. So it's clear that with this game mode, a big emphasis is of course the combat, but also strategy, and I'm actually glad that this is the case. After completing your run, I am glad to say that there are actually rewards that you can claim, and it's not just XP books or XP for your weapons. There is actually Primo Gems, and the Primo Gems actually are a good amount. Now you will be able to claim first time rewards when you first clear the theater, which will add to the Primo Gem count, but on average you will be getting 480 Primo Gems if you clear all of the certain challenges or redeem all of the rewards that the theater gives. And if I'm not mistaken, this is basically the amount that limited time events give. So it's nothing insane, but by no means nothing small either. Another reward that you can claim from the theater are these special character poses. So for very specific characters, basically they'll have a special pose that you're able to use when you're using the camera function. And I gotta say, I don't really know how I feel about this. Now this is the thing, I'm by no means saying that the character poses are bad or anything. In fact, I actually do like them. Like, they showed off jeans, I like it a lot. There's also one for Ayato, which I'm sure is gonna be sick. But the only thing is that I just don't really know how much use I'll actually get out of these poses. Like, if this were a year or two ago, then I would actually be really happy with this, just because for those that may remember, I would actually use the camera function as my outro for my videos, and I would actually pose characters, and if I were able to actually make use of these poses, then I would actually be really happy. Like, this would be a really good addition for me at that time, because I mean, real quick, it's basically reminding me of those certain Genshin videos where there's a character in a scenic position, they have a very specialized pose, and there's music in the background. Like, I always complained that I wasn't able to make my characters look like the way that, you know, the videos would be able to make them. And this basically solves this, but it's just and I'm sure many other people really don't use the camera, so I don't think there's gonna be much players to actually make use of this reward. As for my final thoughts on the game mode, I'll mention my, I guess you could say, negative one in the end. And basically it's just bringing something back to like that the developer said a long time ago that basically just contradicted this entire game mode. But anyways, overall, what I will say is, of course, this game mode is an absolute dub. Like, there's, by no means is this a bad thing. Genshin needed endgame desperately. It's been, what, like 4 years, and now finally we're getting endgame. Obviously, this is like really late, but it's better than nothing, and really this will just give a lot more life to the game. It's gonna bring me back to the game, it's gonna make me far more excited about the game and have me playing more often, and I'm just glad that finally we have endgame. You know, when it came to Star Rail, which I'm sure some of you know I've been playing, the biggest thing that's kept me on that game is endgame. Like, just the constant grind, the excitement of building new characters and getting your team or account better, all these things, and then using them in endgame. It's just fun. I really enjoy it, and now finally Genshin has that same sort of experience. Another thing I want to comment on is, I know that there is some people that are feeling pretty skeptical of the whole restriction when it comes to selecting certain units. You know, as mentioned, you're only able to select certain units that reach a certain criteria, but I gotta say, I'm actually happy with this change. The reason why I can best explain through Star Rail's Memory of Chaos. So when you're in the Memory of Chaos, you don't just choose any sort of character that you want or any team that you want to play. Really, you center the team that you're going to be playing around the enemies that you're going to be facing. So let's say if there's a lightning weak enemy, I'm going to then choose a lightning based team or a lightning based DPS. And why I like this is because basically, unlike Genshin, it's not that I can just choose any sort of unit, any sort of element that I want. I'm basically forced to use certain units, and that allows me to get, I guess you could say, the most use out of my units. Currently in Genshin, there's so many units that I like, but I basically don't use just because there's really no reason to use them. Like, I love Ayato, I love all these other DPSs, but when I've got the likes of Neuvillette and Arlecchino, and I got all these crazy reactions that I can do, you know, what's the use of using all these other units? But pretty much the way that this theater has the team building, it pretty much solves this to where you're not able to just use whoever you want. You have to use certain units that they specify, and really this will, in my opinion, give a lot more variability in your gameplay instead of just using the same units over and over and over. Now, the last thing is that, as much as I am happy with this game mode, in a certain sense, I'm not really impressed. And the reason why I'm thinking about this is because long ago, I want to say like a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago, basically there was a time where there was all these really cool combat events coming out in Genshin, but the problem was that they were limited. So of those that, you know, wanted a combat endgame and so on, basically they were requesting the developers, hey, can you please make this permanent? I think this was all the way in Inazuma or something like that. I can't recall. But basically the developers actually responded and they said, no, we're not going to make these events permanent endgame just because they don't really meet our standards for permanent endgame. It's kind of crazy that they said this just because this is now our permanent endgame, but in truth, these, or the theater that we have now, is really not all that different from the freaking combat events that we had all that time ago. I really don't see the difference of standard. Like, to be quite honest, it's kind of just the same game mode. The only difference I really see is visually. Like, the background is really nice, the background is beautiful, but I mean, when it comes to like the basics or the fundamental rules of the theater, it's basically the same as almost every combat event that we've had. So really, it doesn't add up, nor does it make sense. But I mean, frick it, you know, whatever. We're getting combat game mode or end game. I don't know what they were talking about, but hey, bro, we got it. Whatever. It's a dub in the end. Took him 4 years, but hey man, we got it, whatever. But anyways, these are my thoughts on the game. Again, I'm really happy. By no means am I saying it's bad, but it's just, I don't know what they're talking about. If you know what they're talking about, please let me know in the comments. And even then beyond that, I just want to know, what are your guys' opinion on the game? And are you excited? Do you think it could have been better? And is this gonna bring you back to Genshin? Have you been taking a break, and is this finally the thing that you've been waiting for, and now it's finally here? Please let me know all these things in the comments. And with that, thank you all for watching. Take care, and thank you all for watching once again.